This is the Art Zone.
You're watching The Art Zone. Art Zone is a document of art and artists in the Rockford area. In this episode, we will speak with Tracy Dice-Doris at the Discovery Center and take a walk through the Beatrix Potter exhibit. Then we will talk with Sarah Bell and see some of her watercolors recently shown at Cafe Esperanto. Finally, we'll meet with Rockford Art Museum's new curator, Stella Dobbins, as we tour their current exhibit, the Stateliness Vicinity Show.
This is the Art Zone. 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 This is the Art Zone.
Hi, I'm Doc Slavkowski, and this is the Art Zone. We're coming to you from J.R. Kortman Center for Design downtown in the heart of Rockford's Cultural District. This Art Zone will take you to the home and studio of Rockford artist Sarah Bell, and we'll hear from Stella Dobbins, the new curator at the Rockford Art Museum, as we take a look at the Stateliness Vicinity Show at the museum. But first, we're going to pay a visit to the Discovery Center, where the magic of a child's storybook comes to life in an installation entitled Through the Garden Gate, featuring illustrations and memorabilia from the world of Beatrix Potter.
Through the Garden Gate, the World of Beatrix Potter. This exhibit chronicles the life and works of Peter Rabbit creator Beatrix Potter. She was an artist, she was a conservationalist, and she was also a scientist. And so because Discovery Center is an arts and science museum, it highlights our mission incredibly. Beatrix Potter wrote famous children's books, and she was also able to make a contribution to the scientific community as well. So those are the things we're highlighting in the exhibit here. This exhibit is here at Discovery Center Museum from June 3rd until August 28th, 1994, and it's sponsored by Bank One locally, and through a strong community effort and the steering committee of the cast of thousands, we were able to put this exhibit together. Well, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History organized the exhibit originally, and since its conception and its original construction, it circulated the country, and now it's here in Rockford, and this is going to be the only time this summer it's going to be in this section of the country. So it appeals because it was built, Beatrix Potter's 100th anniversary of the creation of Peter Rabbit was last year. So that inspired the creation of this particular exhibit, and it has been traveling since then. And as it travels, it gets better. More things get added on to it. Well, that's because it fits in, with the Discovery Center mission. I think maybe when it was conceptualized, it was a little bit more flat than it is, but through the circulation of the exhibit, we've actually added things, and we've built a larger than life-size tree in the back, and, with the hands-on activities in the back with the bunny ears and the face painting and the live animals, because our museum is a hands-on museum. So we wanted things that they could not only see, but they could touch, rather than something, to the wall that you just walk around and look at, because it really appeals to people to learn by doing and to appreciate the art. You become involved in it, and that's the whole concept of the exhibit, is to become involved in this art. And it's like you're stepping into her world, her mind, her creative mind, when you come through the exhibit, and it's structured that way. Well, from the look on the exhibit staff, it was just the exhibit coordinator, just really, and her team of the production crew, hours upon hours upon hours of hard work. And it took a lot of effort to get something this beautiful. It was just an incredibly intense effort, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without help from people like George Harnish, who was the exhibit set designer, and then Mike Bugler was on the committee, and he helped me a lot with the promotional materials and things like that, and the people that built the tree in the Park District. And yes, those are on loan from the free library, Free Philadelphia Library. So those are on loan. Those are original sketches and drawings by Potter. I believe that these are just simply drawings that she did of things in nature, basically. Not so much the original drawings for the small, what they call the little books. So these are more nature drawings. You know, some people say that it's just for adults, and then they find the little hidden things that are here for kids. And some people say, well, this is not, you know, what can we do here? And the kids are having so much fun. It's for everybody. There's something here for everybody. And, you know, the Beatrix Potter fans have come out, you know, just to see this because they're crazy about that. So anybody who's liked or loved Peter Rabbit at one point in their life and live in the area, I strongly encourage them to come. We love to see people keep, you know, coming. So in the special events, like on Saturdays, we have talked to the animals, and they can come on Saturdays and pet live animals, like the ones Beatrix was a sheep herder, and later in her life, and lived on Hilltop Farm. So they come and they pet the animals that, you know, Beatrix once had, and it's an incredible experience for people of all ages, and the response has been really well, and we're hoping to see more and more people come out and enjoy it.
Sarah Bell is one of Rockford's most accomplished watercolor artists. Her fluid and colorful paintings bring dramatic movement to the female figure on canvas. But not only does Sarah apply her artistry to canvas, but also to silk, creating beautiful wearable works of art. Here now is this Art Zone's featured artist, Sarah Bell. Okay, we're downtown Rockford on the near east side in an old residential neighborhood. Actually, I think it was an old Italian district. This is on First Street. And we're talking with artist Sarah Bell. This is her residence, and also her studio space is in this old house. And we're going to talk to Sarah, who displayed at the Kortman Gallery in the summer of 1994.
Right.
Just very current. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work?
Just about the work.
You work in watercolor.
I work in watercolor. It's wet on wet, and which means the paper is very, very wet when I'm applying the paint, and so I allow the paint to do at least half of the work. I don't like to control it too much, let the paint do its job. Once the paint is dry, then I'll go back and detail and define. So it's basically wet on wet work, and the majority of the work that hung in your gallery space was figurative, female figures, which is probably the most of what I do.
Now, when you first started painting, did you work in watercolor, or what was it?
No, my background through college, I was never offered the opportunity to do watercolor, and so that is something I picked up in late 1970s. Took some classes at Rockford College and got started mainly to learn how to do watercolor so that I could teach it. At that time I was teaching high school art and wanted to be able to teach that medium to the kids. So I took watercolor to learn how to do it myself and became very enamored with it and picked it up as kind of a full-time thing. I think some people who like to be very controlled about their work, it makes it very difficult for them. But in my case, I think it makes it look, it's more spontaneous for me. And I like the fact that if the paint does all these watery, wonderful things, that if it works beautifully, I'm just a really good painter and I can really handle watercolor. And if it doesn't quite work perfectly, I can blame it on the process. So I almost have an out as to whether or not I'm not in total control. But I think that's why it's a real honest way to work with watercolor as well, because you're letting the paint do its job before you're totally controlling it.
When I think about your work, there's a lot of movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can't help it when the paint's floating on the surface. There's just no way that it becomes stagnant. And I've toyed with the idea, and I have tried often to paint on dry surfaces and do some of the same things and be more controlled just to see if I can do it. And it's just so boring. It's just, I can get so much done in 10 minutes with water and paint, and it's just flying like mad. It's just like, and that's the really fun part. I mean, I think that's when I'm being the most creative, is when I'm backing off and letting the paint do some of the work too.
You have also applied your watercolor technique to silk scarves.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was a really natural transition, because when you apply paint to a wet surface, it spreads all over the place. So when you apply dyes to a fabric surface, it does the same thing. It bleeds like mad. And so it was a very easy transition for me to start to apply dyes onto fabric. Now, the reason I started it was I went to a seminar down in Kansas City Art Institute when I was teaching, and that time watched a whole class where they were all working on silk and fabrics, and I'd never had any contact with it and thought that it looked really fun and interesting. And a couple of years went by and I had children, and they were very small at the time, and I didn't have the brain power to concentrate on watercolors, so I considered doing the silk just as kind of a decorative fun thing, and it still is very much that. The paintings are more serious, but the silk is it's restful for my brain. It keeps the energy going. I can play with pattern and things, but I don't have to be so conscious of composition and technique. So.
But I just want to say this about the scarves is that they don't come across to me like that. I mean, they actually do look like fine art, and I think that's what's really intriguing about them, because they can be framed.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I've seen them framed. I know
Sure.
people who own them have them framed, but they do go a step beyond, like, just, I think, superfluous design.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true, and you said they go beyond the paintings, because I don't feel with the watercolor that when I start doing all those little patterns and squares and plaids and polka dots and all the things that you can apply to a piece of fabric, they're not as effective in a painting. They take away from the overall composition and kind of the mood I'm trying to portray. Whereas in a scarf, it makes it more decorative, more effective as a wearable thing that would twist and bend around someone's neck. So when I paint with watercolor, I paint with not color but values, darks, mediums, and lights. And so I'll have the drawing of, say, a woman, and maybe her arms would be spread out and with some fabric coming over a shoulder stripe or whatever, but when I'm actually applying the paint, when the surface is wet, anything that strikes me as dark, like an armpit or the line between lips or the background, I will do at the same time. So I won't like paint the figure first and then add the background, but I'll be doing, oftentimes, beginning, with the lightest areas and doing the lights in the background, and so it's all being brought up at the same time with lights, mediums, and darks. And so in that way, I think that the figures and the background become almost simultaneous, that they work really together, and that's kind of a landscape. Figurative painting traditionally, I think, is portraying a figure within an environment, and my premise is kind of that environment becomes part of the figures. I think personally, it's more meaningful for me just to have a human contact, and I feel that figures pull your eye and your psyche into a piece. I mean, you can start to relate to what that figure is doing, how that figure is sitting. But with the way the watercolor works with these particular figures, I think they almost start to become landscape as well. And for me to do watercolor landscapes is not as appealing. I like the twist of trying to incorporate the human element but still make it look landscape-like. I'm pretty sure I'll never be an abstract person, but now I'm starting to incorporate birds and things like that and animals, and I think that's been brought in because I've been doing more of those kinds of things in the scarves, and then I start to look at these bird shapes and start to see human faces and their expressions and the way their necks bend are really the same as the way my models bend.
But where does that come from? I mean, you're living right here in the city. I mean, this is not a rural setting by any means.
I think it's an interest in decorative things. Some of my resources are a book called The Grammar of Ornament, which is a catalog that was put out in I think it was 1860s or 70s, that cataloged, Egyptian design, Pompeii design, Greek, Roman, I mean, through the ages, Byzantine, and I'm real interested in those kind of motifs, and animals are incorporated in all of those throughout, as well as people. It's not just shapes and forms, it's recognizable characters too, and I think that's where that comes from.
What do you want?
Oh, also I have kids, and they have animals all over the place, and that's interesting to them, and I that's part of it too.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about that and I had forgotten. But how about what do your kids think about your work?
I'm kind of surprised sometimes. I think maybe they think that everybody's mom does this, so it's no big deal. But I know other times they're thrilled that I can come into, say, their classroom and talk about my painting, or even talk about somebody else's painting and describe things in it, and that's really fun for them.
Do you think that the talent is being passed on?
That's not fair for them, but they certainly have access to anything they ever want to use, and that's, I think, that for any child is what makes the interest, builds the interest for them, if it's accessible to them. So, and we go to art shows and we know a lot of people who do art, but then they also know a lot of people who are involved in old houses and construction, and it's just part of our lives. So it will be interesting to see where all of that goes. The house, we've worked on the house longer than I've been doing watercolor, so that's, I think I have a real interest in traditional types of things, like this happens to be a Victorian house, and the way the structure is put together and the quality of things, and the colors used, and all the fancy woodwork and all that maybe is incorporated into my work, and that I like that traditional base. But even though it's a traditional base, I don't want to live in the 1870s. I want to live in 1994, and my paintings kind of are traditional figures, but treated in a contemporary way with watercolor. And this house is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that, because the house does retain a lot of the characteristics of an old Victorian house, but at the same time you feel very modern when you're in here. I mean, you don't feel like you're necessarily taking a step back in time. It's more of being in the present and having an appreciation for what was
and
there.
it's living with the old as a contemporary thing. I mean, just because it's old doesn't mean it's outdated, and just because it's old doesn't mean it needs to be a museum either. It's still livable, it's still alive, and it's still part of us. And we don't really own this house. We're just taking care of it until the next person comes along, and we kind of feel that about it too.
So there's no ghost living here that's inspiring.
I always hope so. I always hope so, but it hasn't made an appearance yet. The most important, what would be the most fun for me would be when I have a 3 by 4 foot piece of paper that's been soaked for an hour and a half in my bathtub, and I throw that out on my table, and I have huge blobs of color in a 3-inch brush, and I scoop up a big glob of blue, and I just start going like this, and it's just like, oh, this is so much fun. And I think that if someone walks up to one of the larger paintings and looks at that blue paint, I would like them to have that same feeling, like, oh, look, how did that happen, And they'll think, oh, how did she ever do it? And I should be whispering to them that I kind of did it, but the water helped me, and there's all kinds of things, but it's that just, paint flying, and then it doesn't have to be confined. It can say all kinds of things by just the way that it's moving. I think right now it's a wonderful time to be in Rockford, and it's a wonderful time to live in this area, simply because we have walking access to all the art things that happen in the downtown area, as well as things like the bike path and Jefferson Street Bridge and the library, and wonderful things like that too. So I think as far as the group of friends that I know, and many of them are teachers and artists, I think they're all feeling very excited about the things that are happening, simply even with the number of art shows that you can attend, the number of art shows you can send students to see, and the number of artists that live in this town that you can talk to. I think that's all just great. And I hope that it keeps going, and they don't get too disappointed and go back into their shells again. And I kind of hope that a lot of people outside of this kind of inner circle that we live within will start to notice and come back too.
This is the Art Zone.
This is the 63rd Stateliness Vicinity Show. It encompasses works by 85 artists from 3 states, Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Actually, Illinois is most represented in the exhibition because there are 75 artists in the show from Illinois, and there are 7 from Wisconsin and 5 from Iowa. There were 2 jurors who juried the show. Henry Moy, who's the director of museums at Beloit College, and Bill Butler, who's curator of Lakeview Museum of Arts and Sciences in Peoria. The exhibition, I think, is extremely important because it brings to the Rockford area a very diverse look at what is being done in the arts today. And if one visits the museum, you can expect to find art that has been rendered technically in a very extraordinary manner. Some unusual, innovative ideas can be seen here. And also the imagery ranges from very conceptual pieces to high realism. So you can expect to see the complete range of imagery that is being done in America today.
Me and Uncle Joe were sitting around watching TV and swatting flies when Johnny walked in and sat down between us and looked me in the eye. And he said, "You know, I came here yesterday with a question for Uncle Joe, but he hasn't answered yet. Now I gotta go." And Uncle Joe, he just sat watching the game show on TV. And Johnny said, "I don't know, what would you do if you was me?" Well, Johnny, I said, "You know, I can't speak for Uncle Joe. Maybe he didn't answer, because he just didn't know. And as for me, I don't even know what you asked him yesterday. So whatever Uncle Joe is thinking, I couldn't say." And Johnny, he just sat there, his face all in a frown. And Uncle Joe, he looked at me, and he nodded up and down. Then Johnny said, "You know, I usually dance around this time of year for Uncle Joe and all the people on the reservation here. But there's a man up in Idaho who says my name has got around, and I can make some money when the Sundance comes to town. But I don't know what Uncle Joe would say if I did that." That's what I asked him yesterday, but he hasn't answered yet. Well, Johnny, I said, I can't speak for Uncle Joe. But if it was up to me, I sure don't know. In fact, it seems to me the only one who can answer this is you. You're the one who's got to live with whatever it is you do. So I can't say, Johnny, if you should stay or you should go. And like I said, I can't speak for Uncle Joe. Now Johnny, he sat back and he smacked his forehead with his palm. And Uncle Joe, he looked at me and he nodded up and down. "That's it," said Johnny. "That's what he was waiting for me to know. It just goes to show you how very wise is Uncle Joe." And he stood up and he shook my hand and he went out to the yard. And he waved goodbye to Uncle Joe with one foot in his car. Now I had to leave a few days later for a job out on the coast. And I never did see Uncle Joe again. That's what I regret the most. And as for Uncle Joe, he never said another word. But then he never did speak English. That's what I always heard. And I wonder about that Johnny, did he ever get to Idaho? I hope I see him sometime. I'd really like to know.
We hope you enjoyed the Art Zone. And if you have video art or even comments or suggestions, we'd like to hear from you. Contact us at J.R. Kortman Center for Design, 107 North Main, or give us a call at 968-0123. Thank you for watching The Art Zone.